started?
Hit it.
All right. How you doing, Mr. Zine?
I'm doing fine, sir.
Good. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure to be here with you, sir.
I'm Jose Huizar, council member, and I've been joined by Councilmember Dennis Zine. Wendy Gruel is excused, and we will begin today's meeting. If we could, with Mr. Zine's concurrence, ask that item number 5 and item number 6 be put on consent, unless Mr. Zine has any particular questions on either of those two items. Okay.
5's okay. 6 okay. Okay. Very good.
And can the clerk read those two items, please, so that we can just let the public who's hearing us know what those are?
Item number 5 is a city control report relative to fiscal year 2007-08 audited financial statements and the debt service compliance report for the sewer construction and maintenance fund. Item number 6, the city controller report relative to fiscal year 2007-08 audited financial statements.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll have those on consent, and today we will be hearing from the Department of Water and Power on a progress report on the number of eligible customers who are enrolled in the low-income discount programs. We will also be hearing about recommendations to reform the city's contracting process. So with that, why don't we begin on item number 1. Clerk?
Item number 1 is Department of Water and Power reports in response to motion relative to the low-income discount program.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi. Good afternoon, council members Huizar and Zine. My name is Mickey Yonamine. I'm with the Customer Service Division of Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and I'm one of the managers working on the low-income program. And we had sent a letter to this committee in January 22nd, just giving you an update on where we are on signups. As of Tuesday of this week, however, we are at 209,325 participants on Low Income and Lifeline. And we continue to work with databases that we have access to now, the Housing Authority as well as the Home Energy Assistance Programs. And why those two lists are very valuable is that they are income qualified individuals on that list. So what we do is we utilize those lists, and those that are applicable for Low Income and Lifeline, we put them on the program. We have our own efforts, of course, through our contact center, our service centers, our bill inserts, and our events, and so we happen to continue to sign people up through those avenues. We also have a 3-year agreement with the Southern California Gas Company where we will be sharing data with them in their low-income program. And we're going to be meeting with them sometime on the 25th next week to actually look at how the processes are going to work in terms of how we're going to data share. We continue with our efforts through the neighborhood councils, as well as working through these lists and through these other agencies to identify income qualified applicants. And as well as we do have the ability to target various regions of Los Angeles for income qualified individuals. By the end of 2009, we are targeting at least to getting 240 to 250,000 people on these programs.
How many? 250?
240 to 250, right. So that'd be adding another 30,000, 40,000 participants.
How many ratepayers do you have in the city?
There's about, when we did the looking at it, it's more like 1.5 million customers. However, of the residential, you're looking closer to 1.2 million or so.
There's 1.5 million people in the San Fernando Valley.
Customers, though, we're looking at customers. So their number of people can be
families,
not individuals.
So you're looking at 250 total when you finally get your full spread.
I'm sorry.
You're looking at 250 when you get your full spread.
250.
That's the goal.
At the end of this year. But see, we're going to continue to add people onto the Low Income and Lifeline program as we go.
What's your ultimate number? Or do you have one?
We have a consultant on board who is looking at the number of income qualified individuals within the city of Los Angeles, within our service territory. And so what we're doing is they're looking at census tract data to determine where these people are and in what the level is in different regions, and they're using census tract data. So we need to take that to look at the census tract data and also then identify how many people that our customers would actually qualify.
But the census tract is 9 years old or 10 years old.
They do utilize other databases to supplement what they know. So,
If the state gets their budget, maybe you'll have some more people qualify.
yes, we definitely know that. I mean, we know even at 250,000, that's probably not reaching 100%. We do know that. But this is a reason why this is an ongoing program where we're going to gradually get as many people on this as we can.
And they receive a 15 to 20% reduction.
About a 20%, yes. For the low income, about 30% for Lifeline.
And then what happens with the new rates that are going in that the mayor's imposed with the...
That was one of the reasons why the rates, the discount was actually 15% for low income previously, and the reason why it went to 20% was to knowing that the rates were going up.
So if the rates go up for everyone, you supplement the low income by additional 5%.
On average, it's about a 20% discount.
But it used to be 15, but now it's gone up to 20,
Mm-hmm.
but the rate's going up much higher. That's the problem. So we're trying to help the low-income families, people with Social Security, with the additional taxation they're going through. Are we giving them any kind of benefit to assist them? That's what I'm trying to find out.
There's other programs like the low income refrigerator program
I'm
where
not talking about water and power. The water use of the consumer and the power use of a consumer. Not
right.
the
The low income refrigerator program is energy efficiency, and that's a DWP program.
Yeah, but
So-
that's electricity.
Right.
But the
But
water-
low income.
Water's the other side.
Right, but low income, actually, you get $5 off your monthly water bill as well.
Are they
So-
paying the same sewer sanitation charge? Which is more than your water charge? The
Now,
sewer
I'll have to look
sanitation
at
charge
that.
is-
The individual that actually does a lot of the billing side of it is ill today, so she wasn't able to accompany, but she would have a little bit more details about
Because when
how.
people look at their water bill, they're paying more to dispose of the water than they are for the flow of the water.
Councilmember.
There's no break on that.
Wendy Yancey, Water and Power, Manager of Government and Neighborhood Affairs. Oftentimes, or generally, I should say, a lot of our low-income customers, they are perhaps apartment dwellers, and they don't pay water, and then they don't pay trash. So, and that's left up to the landlord, if you will.
So is there a break for the landlord?
No, there is not. And that's something that's actually been questioned on a number of occasions because the landlords feel that, there's no
Incentive.
for their residents to conserve water.
There isn't.
But for the low-income customer, though, in addition to, we have a number of energy efficiency as well as water conservation programs. We have the shower aerators, the faucet aerators, et
But let's
cetera.
look at
So,
the basics. If you live in a single-family residence, there's a benefit. If you live in an apartment, there's really no incentive
That's
for the
correct.
apartment dweller because the landlord's paying the water bill.
that is correct. At this particular juncture, yes, that is correct.
And if the consumer, the tenant, the renter was paying, they'd probably be a little more frugal with the use of water.
It's a fair assumption, yes. But for us,
How do we approach that? How do we? Because
it
we've got
is.
so many apartments in the city of Los Angeles, and if people run in there, if the faucet's leaking, they don't fix it. If we're really trying to conserve and be serious about it, why can't we do something for the renter? I'm not saying anything nasty to them, but I'm saying there's no accountability for the renter. They're paying the rent. If they use 5 gallons or 500 gallons, there's no incentive for them. There's an incentive for the person who owns the property to conserve because they're paying the bill. We haven't touched that massive group of people.
You're right. And that's something we are looking into because the landlords, a number of them have brought it to our attention. And so that's something that we are looking into.
Could they put separate meters?
That has been questioned. When you already have an existing building to go in and do separate meters on water, it's
What about-
really
What about new construction?
new construction. That's a different ballgame.
Do
That
we
is
have
easier
that
to
now,
do.
the requirement?
It's not a requirement, it's my understanding, but they're working towards that end. But
About
then
the conversion condos downtown, the office buildings that are converted to condos.
again, existing facilities, unless they're doing a complete tear down almost, It's difficult to do. It's not necessarily cost effective, but again, it is something that folks are looking into.
Don't you think if we're serious about conserving water, we should do something in that arena? Because it seems that there's no way to make an incentivize for the renters.
You're right.
And if we did, then maybe we could be serious about conserving water. Because if you're the one paying the bill, you're probably going to be more conscientious about it. So maybe we should look into that.
No, well, we are. We are.
We could get a report back on that. We'll,
Like all new construction, I don't know why we couldn't say for new construction that they would require, I think they all have separate gas meters, if I'm not mistaken, in apartment buildings. Each resident has a separate gas meter. Why couldn't we do something with the water if we're serious about conserving water? That would be a way of encouraging them to conserve since they're paying for it.
we can ask for a report back on that. We're going to actually have this item come back to us in 90 days. It's a continuous progress report, and we can ask for a report back in that.
Oh,
we get our
90 days
report
is
back.
perfect.
Okay.
And how we can adapt this to new construction. Then we got all kinds of restrictions on new construction. I think the landlords would support it, and it would make an
Oh, they
incentive
would.
for the tenant to be more conservative with the use of water.
Okay.
Just seems common sense to me.
A couple of questions on my end. The agreement with Southern California Gas Company, when will we finalize that?
Oh, it's been finalized.
Been
We're just
finalized,
going
okay.
through now and looking at the process of how we're going to share the data and what format and the timing and things like that.
What's the timeline? When can that actually be implemented?
We're going to be meeting with them next week. So
Okay.
once we sit down and look at what we have, then we'll have a better idea of how this timing is going to work out.
Okay. And do we have any estimates as to how many more customers we think we may capture?
We're hoping that based on some of the data that they've shared with us, that we're looking at another 100,000
Another
individuals.
100,000?
Mhm.
Wow, that's huge.
Right, but that's over the next 3 years.
Over 3 years.
Yeah.
Over 3 years. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And finally, I had in my notes that there were 203,000,
Yes, that was at the end of this year, end of 2008.
but as of last week, 209.
Yesterday, 209.
209,000. Now, is that for all three programs? The low-income discount program, the Lifeline rate program, and the refrigerator exchange program? Or is that just one program?
It's just low income and Lifeline.
So both of those, right?
Mhm.
So it includes just those two. Okay. Do you have a breakdown of those two?
Yes, I probably do have that broken down. I think it's closer to maybe 92,000 on Lifeline, and then maybe 100 and whatever's left would be the low income.
Okay. All right.
I could get you exact numbers on that, though.
That's fine. Well, thank you. We'll continue this item for 90 days and get updates, and I think the progress has been, seems like there's some good progress, but one of the big ones is going to be the agreement with the gas company once that gets started. And if we could also get a report back on Mr. Zine's issue about how we could better capture the usage of tenants within units and condos, apartments, et cetera, so that we could help preserve or reduce the usage of water. So, great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next item has to do with our contracting procedures. There are 3 items on this. We will take them all together. And as you know, each year the city spends about $1.5 billion in contracts, and that's about more than a fifth of the $7 billion budget. I know that the mayor has put together a task force as to how we could better manage all our contracts, and the controller has worked on this since 2006 with her audit, and the CLA and the CEO have been working on this for the past 2 years to consider these ideas and how we actually implement them. So let's take these items together. If the clerk could read those items, and then we have some representatives here who will present this item.
Item number 2 is the Public Works Bureau of Contract Administration communication in response to motion relative to a report from the General Manager's Working Group on contracts, recommendations to facilitate efficiencies in the city's contracting process. Item number 3 is the Chief Legislative Analyst and City Administrative Officer Joint Report in response to motion relative to improving the city's contracting process. And item number 4 is the CLA and CAO joint report and city controller report relative to improving the city's contracting process.
Great. We could invite up the Public Works Bureau of Contract Administration and to give us a report on the General Manager's Working Group.
Good afternoon, council members. John Raymer, the Director of the Bureau of Contract Administration. Roughly around June of last year, there was a request from the Mayor's office for several of my colleagues to examine the contracting process for the city for the purposes of establishing efficiencies, best practices. What can we do to make the process better? Right about that time, my bureau was also in the process of convening several discussion groups with the many departments that we have due to the fact that the economic climate had challenged our budget and caused us to lose staff, and as a result, come up with ways to better administer the several ordinances that are associated with many of the contracts that are administered. In doing that, one of the things that we noticed was that over 50% of those working on contracts in the city of LA have less than 3 years of experience. Clearly, it said to us that there is a need for, and as was communicated to us in the survey that we did, for us to provide more training and more communication. So the framework for the report that we gave back to the mayor as general managers was a 3-phase approach, making sure that we protected 3 areas: opportunity, consistency, and transparency. The 3 phases are broken down into a 6-month increment, an 18-month increment, and a 30-month increment. All of them dealing with strengthening the lines of communication, leveraging information, and ultimately leading to a centralized database where we can house all of this information, if you will, to create an electronic contracting environment, very similar to a TurboTax, if you will, where if you were to envision this, any person working on contracts in a department could pull up to a terminal, and at their very fingertips they would be able to access information that speaks to how we do contracting in the city of LA. We did not establish a baseline for time. That was one of the concerns that we received from many of those who gave input, that it takes too long to process a contract in the city of Los Angeles. What we wanted to do at first was not point fingers, but establish the fact that this is something that we as a city family need to own together. So collectively, let's work at how we can fix this, and that started the process of communication. We've already held our first contracting forum, if you will, citywide, where representatives from every department, including the proprietary departments, came together and we talked about some of the challenges that we see, some of the things that we would like to bring about. Everyone was excited about this, I don't want to say new approach, but the fact that as a city family we're going to be working on this. One of the things that we currently have up and running is a centralized webpage where anybody can access it, if you will, to get information. In times past, this information was scattered amongst 3 or 4 city web pages, and so this was something that was received quite favorably. Ultimately, again, the direction and the path that we want to take is to streamline this process by turning it into an electronic world where this information is processed, and the best and the brightest, we, if you will, glean all of their information and house it in this electronic environment so that it's more readily accessible. So that's where we are right now. It's a long road, but I want to argue a short road because we have many hands working together to make this work very light.
Great, thank you. And so you have any implementation? You don't have an implementation timeline, and to implement some of the recommendations from your report. Or it's supposed to be been discussion at this time, correct?
It's
There's
discussion.
no real recommendations that the city has to, this council has to change any ordinances or anything else. It's been mostly discussion at this point.
That's something that more than likely will happen under the efficiencies piece. One of the things that has been discussed is a reviewing of our ordinances from the standpoint of thresholds. Are they current, up-to-date. Many of the thresholds that exist are the same thresholds that were put in place at the inception of the ordinances, so they have not kept up with the fact that there have been cost of living adjustments in many areas. Contracts have increased, yet the ordinances and the thresholds that are with them have stayed the same. So keeping with the intent of the ordinance, not to eliminate, making sure that we monitor these areas, we are now applying ordinances on certain contracts that would not have been applied in times past, simply because that hasn't changed. So that's one thing that we will be having to come to council with. Because we are, and we being the Bureau of Contract Administration, the DAA over many of these contracting ordinances, we have been putting together a list, if you will, of items that we will be bringing to council to discuss so as to make this go forward a lot smoother.
And do we know more or less when that will happen? No.
We're working with the city attorney's office now,
Yeah.
and I would love to be able to have it done before this fiscal year is over, especially going into the new fiscal year and the challenges that we know we're going to face from a budgetary standpoint. We're looking at it from the standpoint of how can we administer the ordinances, not compromise the intent, but not have to do as much work as we are right now, because it's very labor intensive, very paperwork intensive on several of the ordinances. We have several that are applicable for every single contract. In this sense, we cannot process executing the contract until we vet it to make sure that the information that is required of the contractor or the proposer has been submitted. So what we find ourselves with is a bottleneck. We have all of these contracts. I believe in the document that you received from us, we cited that there was close to 1,000 contracts in fiscal year 07-08. If you can imagine, all of these contracts having to be vetted for, I'll just give one of the ordinance, equal benefits. And the ordinance itself does have great value, and the council has stood behind it. But this is an example of slowing down the process. What can we do to expedite this? One of the things we can do is, A, take a look at the threshold, but B, do we need to have all this information, or can we turn it into a complaint-driven program where we allow the proposal or the contractor to submit an affidavit signed under penalty of perjury, understanding that there may be a random audit to take a look and see whether or not we have a problem. So these are the things that we are considering and that we believe will greatly enhance our desire to expedite this process.
The final question is, so we are working towards getting a citywide electronic database for contracting, correct?
Yes.
Now, does each department currently have a contracting manual in place, or they have their own separate?
We found that some departments do not. The department that had the best manual in place that we were able to glean the bulk of our information from, and let's clarify this. We're talking personal services contracts. We have a plethora of contracts. The two large areas would be construction and personal services, but every department has in common personal services contracts. General services had the best manual for our purpose here. We sanitized it, and we have that as part of this web page, if you will. So now every department can take a look at it, pull it down, and use it to personalize it for their own needs. So to answer your question, no, that did not exist, but we're moving in the direction where they all have access now to a model they can use.
Okay, thank you. Stan, any questions for the Bureau of Contract Administration? And we're going. Okay, the controller, CAO, CLA. Do you guys want to add anything to this? I shouldn't ask. I should just. Let me ask the controller's office to come up. Back in 2006, the controller actually initiated some of these conversations, and given what was the questions that were asked then and where we are now, what's your view on where we are in terms of addressing some of the issues that were raised?
Farid Safar with Controller's Office. We reviewed the General Manager's report. We believe is a step in the right direction and would answer many of the concerns that Controller raised back in 2006. Also, it's encouraging to see that the group is working toward a centralized monitoring and oversight of cities' contracts. That's one of the issues that Controller raised back in 2006. One comment that we have on the plan that we looked at is some of the tasks identified in there does not have any owner or responsible party to accomplish the task in terms of who is responsible, for example, for web design, for establishing a citywide database, for cities' contracts, the touch base in terms of training. Some of this function could very well be part of the centralized unit that controller envisioned back in 2006 in terms of making sure there is a transparency, consistency in terms of contracting practices, that there is one set of standard contract manuals out there for professional services for all city departments to use, and there is a place for city departments to go to if they need advice or if they have questions in terms of contract type, contract format. Do they need a 50-page contract or a small letter agreement would satisfy the scope they have? So those are the details that I believe hopefully would be worked out as part of this general manager's task force group, and hopefully would be having really effective, efficient contracting process.
Okay, thank you. So with that, let me, this was also supposed to be referred to Budget and Finance. Let's go ahead and note and file these items and refer them to Budget and Finance. Well, actually, items 3 and 4 are related to item 2, so that if we could refer all of them to Budget and Finance? Is that possible, even though they weren't originally referred?
You could ask the council president.
Okay, we'll do that. And but I do want to hear back within 90 days to see how we're doing.
Okay.
That'd be okay in terms
Sure.
of the progress of this effort?
Sure.
And one thing I never understood is you're within the Public Works Department, correct?
Yes.
But you oversee personal services contracts in a number of other departments.
In the sense that we are the identified designated administrative agency for many of the ordinances that are applicable to contracting.
Okay.
Case in point, equal benefits, living wage, slavery disorder, service contractor worker retention. So all of the contracts that are going to be executed within the council control departments, we serve as the DAA. We also have MOUs with many of the proprietary departments. They've adopted these ordinances as policy. We provide them the expertise, if you will, if they have any challenges or concerns regarding those ordinances. So that's what expands us beyond the borders of Public Works.
And the proprietary departments are part of this general manager's task force?
Yes.
Yeah, they are.
Yes. They made it very clear that they wanted to participate. They did show up at our first forum, and they've been very active and giving very good comments.
Okay. And there was somebody from the harbor today in council, and I asked if they were participating in this. They said no, but maybe they got that wrong.
Yeah, no, they were there.
They must be there.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. So we'll refer them to Budget and Finance, and if we could get a report back in 90 days just to see the progress. Is that sufficient, or you probably need?
No, 90 days is good.
Okay.
Just a progress report update, let you know how things are going. Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, well, I think that takes care of all the items. Is that correct? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Zine.
Sweet.